So this morning, I'm starting a brand new series of messages, and today will be just a basic overview, and in the weeks to come, we'll kind of dig into it some more. And that is, we're going to start talking about character. And I don't mean how to be a character, but how do we have character in our lives, and what is it? Don't we all expect leaders to have it? We're disappointed when they don't, but it's hard to define. When I was kind of doing some research for this message, I couldn't really find a great definition. Don't look at your bulletin. This is audience participation for a minute. When you think of someone who has character, what do you think of? Okay? Integrity. Kindness. Strength. Good person, honesty. Trustworthy, doing what's right. We're going to get to that in a moment.
You know, sort of like there was senator way back when they were talking about what office is. You can't define it, but he knows it when he sees it.
Yeah, that is true. And we also know it when we don't see it, right? We're going to get to that topic in 2 weeks. In a couple of weeks, we'll be talking about how do we guard our thoughts and our hearts. So this past couple of weeks, I have grappled with some decisions that needed to be made. I don't tend to be horribly vague, but today will be a little bit intentionally vague. Decisions did not have to do with Monacrest or our family, but decisions that I was part of having to help make. And our choices choices weren't necessarily great, but we had to decide whether or not to do what was right or what was not right. And in the process of doing that, there were people that were hurt. And so those are things we grapple with, right? Because sometimes when we go for truth, when we go for what is right, people don't understand it, they don't get it, they feel hurt. And so I was faced with that in the last couple of weeks, and it has been hard. Sometimes people who are in places of making decisions, sometimes we have to make the tough calls. And I have grappled with it for a couple of weeks now. But in the end, what matters most is what does God want? And so we base our decisions on that and not other things. And so this morning, I'd like us to do just kind of a simple overview of how could we define character? What is character not? And then again, we'll dig into it more in a couple of weeks. We're going to be in the book of Psalms. I've been in Psalms for 3 weeks in a row, kind of by accident, I suppose. But I just felt like this was the passage that God had for us this morning. Psalm 15. Last week we were in 13. You can go one more, Allison. Lord, who may dwell in your sacred tent? Who may live on your holy mountain? The one whose walk is blameless, who does what is righteous, who speaks the truth from their heart, whose tongue utters no slander, who does no wrong to a neighbor, and casts no slur on others, who despises a vile person, but honors those who fear the Lord, who keeps an oath even when it hurts, and does not change their mind, who lends money to the poor without interest, who does not accept a bribe against the innocent. Whoever does these things will never be shaken. In the New Living Translation, it says, whoever does these things will stand firm. And we live in a society where it is hard to figure out what does character look like. And once we figure it out, then we have to figure out how to live it. And whether we like it or not, when we claim Jesus, people are watching. and they are waiting for us to screw it up. Right? And we do it. And sometimes we have to go back and fix things and say we're sorry and get back on track. So today I want to talk to us about what is character and what is character not. So let's talk about the first part. What is character not? Character is not our reputation. Many of us spend a lot of time trying to make sure we have a good reputation. And our reputation is what people think of me and what I present to the world. I heard this week when describing somebody, well, that person's very put together. They have it all together. They present themselves well. Well, listen. On any given Sunday, I could put on a nice dress and some cute heels. They're new. And you can sit back there and go, wow, I hope I look a little put together, right? She took a shower, she brushed her teeth today, It's not frightening. You didn't run into me at Walmart yesterday at 7 a.m. with my, sweatpants on. You pray you don't get on that Facebook page, people at Walmart. You know what I'm talking about. Some of you have been those people. But I could present a good picture. I could come in every Sunday. There have been Sundays when I have come in and I have painted a good picture and I go back to my office and I am under the desk crying. Because my reputation is what I present to you, what I want you to think about me. But that is not my character. My character is when you break me open and get a good look at what's inside. And some days I look like this, and some days I look like people at Walmart. We've all been there. Every single time I decide to leave the house not looking so cute, I run into one of you. And I'm like hiding. I'm in the pet food aisle. I don't have a pet, but I'm hiding from you. Right? I think I need some costume tape to keep this thing from moving. So that is what we present to the world is not really our true character. Now, hopefully someday we get to the point where it will match. That's the goal, right? Or maybe we hope that our inside looks better than the outside. Every day I look in the mirror. I'm having to look closer these days. Alexa, bless her heart, she's trying to do my mom's makeup for the wedding, and I was trying to be tactful, but I finally said, I've never worked on mature skin before. My mom goes, so our character is not, I got a little off tangent. It was too funny not to say when it popped in my head. All right, so our character is not our reputation. Our character should not be changeable, meaning we should be living in such a way that our values, our standards remain the same. The world's values and standards change every day. The world tells you, pick a truth, be true to yourself. Emily stole part of my sermon. I'll get to it. We planned the same sermon today. I stole one of her quotes in my sermon at the end, so it's all right. But we must decide what are our standards, what are our values, what do we hold to be true, and we don't get to change them. Do you remember when my dad used to stick his finger in his mouth and go, where the wind blows? I always shuddered a little. But we don't get to decide that based on what the world is telling us. Thirdly, character is not every person for themselves. Right? Doesn't the world say, well, just do whatever makes you happy, whatever works for you, who cares who you step on to get there? That is what the world tells us to do. That it is about getting ahead, being the best, doing what is best for me. But somebody who has character is someone who is always looking for the best for others, somebody who will always help someone else get ahead, and somebody will always want to lift someone else up. Character is not defined by me if we are true followers of Jesus. We'll get to this in a minute more. Character should not be defined by the people around us. And we do this. We want to fit in with the crowd. We want to be the cool parents. Dirk's friends call Dirk King Dirk because he lets them listen to the radio really loud. But that shouldn't be the goal, right? I hope my kids' friends think I'm cool. I mean, I hope they don't hate me, but Here's number 6, which Emily already spoke upon. Character is not following your heart. I know, if you're watching the Hallmark movies, that's what they tell you. Just follow your heart. Your heart is stupid. Karen always laughs at me. Collene, you're kind of an ice princess. I know. If we followed our hearts, we would be doing the dumbest stuff ever. Right? Because it means we're basing decisions on emotion. Just what Pastor Emily said. Our emotions, listen, I could have 500 emotions in one day. And he's only with me an hour a day. Right? I have Miss Happy over here all the time in my house. And I'm like, Right? And then when she's cranky, it's all, the game's over. We're all in the house like, there was one day this week she was a little down and we were all like, we're cranky. But the world tells us, follow your heart. Do you want to know what would have happened to me if I had followed my heart? No, before that guy. There were a few people before Dirk. Not many. I know you think we were soulmates since we were 2. I don't actually believe in soulmates, but if I did, you're mine, Dirk. But if I had followed my heart, I would be married to a guy that sent me the first dozen roses I ever had for a very long time. It's not a hint, Dirk, it's fine. Had things delivered to me when he was overseas in the military. Wrote me letters. I know. Called me from Germany. You ever had a conversation like that? This was back in the olden days, like in 1990s. Someone would call from overseas and you hear this echo. And you ever decide that if I had followed my heart, I would not be here. Because I would have married the guy that, he does all these nice things for me. And it was never actually a dating relationship, but he was the guy who liked me and pursued me and, didn't love Jesus. Could have been a disaster. But boy, my heart was, but the problems down the line could have been disastrous. It says in Jeremiah 17:9, the heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? Our hearts tell us to do stupid things. People of character, we know that the best way is not always the easiest or the fastest or the most fun. But when we follow Jesus, it is always the best way. Some people believe that Character is talent. I know many, many, many people who have gone into the ministry and they have so much talent, it's oozing out of them. They can preach a message like no one you've ever heard in your life. They can be the entire praise team. They can dance and play piano at the same time. But when the hard times come, they crumble because they relied on that talent. They spent their time developing the talent instead of their character. Now, I'm not, listen, if God has given you a gift and a talent, use it, practice it. Like, we're grateful that we have praise team members that come and give us their music, because if the rest of us who didn't have that gift were trying to do it, it wouldn't be so pretty. But don't base our character on that. Here's a good one that we talk about a lot when it comes to politics in particular. I don't typically touch politics, but charisma. But he had so much charisma. When I was in high school in 1885, the first election I ever voted in was Clinton versus Bush won. Do you remember that campaign? Those of you who were alive, not these guys. Everyone talked about the charisma of Bill Clinton. Do you remember this? Oh, he's so charismatic. And you put him up against George Bush, who's boring. Right? That is part of the reason. The other part was read my lips, no new taxes, but there were. I was falling for Bush. But Clinton won because he was charismatic. And he drew you in, and he was exciting. And we see this with popular preachers today, right? They're just so full of charisma. Was there a problem? Again, I'm not trying to wade into politics, but there was a character problem that came out, right? Because he didn't know what is meant. Some of you watched that. Well, it depends on what you mean by is. It's not hard to define. There was a popular pastor in the 80s and 90s and up until very recently, somebody I had learned from and read books and wrote a book called Character, Who You Are When No One Is Watching, who left his church early because of inappropriate behavior. Charisma didn't help him leave well. It only gets us so far. Some of us think that character is the easy way, the quickest way, or the avoiding way. This one, I kind of have to struggle with this a little bit. Sometimes there's a conflict, so we run away. Some of us have had many, many relationships that have fallen apart in our lives because we're like, bye. I'd rather not deal with that, so I'll just move on. I'm not a huge fan of, having to deal with conflict, but that is how we develop character. It's by addressing things, seeing things through, getting through the tough stuff. Sometimes when we get through the tough stuff, we come out on the other side and it's sweeter. I remember seeing my grandparents who were married for 64 years who got through some tough stuff. But they got to the other side where they had the sweetness of things. But that only happens when we develop good character. Here is how Andy Stanley defines character. Did you bring that book in? Oh, great, thanks. Perfect place for it. I asked him to bring my book. I've been reading a book. Some of you I've preached a message similar to this many years ago, probably Sunday night. Probably the only one who remembers it is maybe Karen or Groves. But Andy Stanley wrote a book called Louder Than Words, so a couple of my quotes come from his book. This is how he defines character. Character is the will to do what is right as defined by God, regardless of personal cost. Did you catch that? Character is the will to do what is right as defined by God, regardless of personal cost. This is where we get truth. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it. But we cannot take this and go, well, that passage about gossiping, I don't like that, so I'm just going to rip it right out. That's one of my favorite sins. Right? The passage is about doubt and little faith. Well, I'll just get rid of that because that's too hard. We are to define truth by what God says it is. One thing that I have been reading, I've been reading a new book, came in last week, I was so happy. It's a book by our Bishop David Kendall. He's our bishop in the middle of the country. And it's called Follow Her Lead. And I was like, well, he wrote a book about women in ministry. I should probably give him my $10 and read the book. And here's what I've appreciated about this book. Because I've been seeing it through a different lens the last couple weeks. For me, it hasn't been just about women in ministry. To me, what Bishop Kendall does in chapters 1, 2, and 3 is he helps us look at the Bible through the entirety of the story. The whole scope of the Bible. And what was God's intent and purposes all throughout the story. And in chapter 1, he gives us some tips on how to read the Bible in here, and they're really, really good. Because sometimes people will come to me and say, well, Jesus didn't really address this issue. Or Paul had 2 verses about this issue, particularly women in ministry. He'll probably get to those verses. I haven't gotten that far. But what does God say about this? And I'm only finding like 2 verses, and I don't understand it. And in this book, Bishop Kendall lays out how we can he takes women in ministry as his kind of focus. But any issue that we struggle with, and we say, what was God's intent through the whole story of the Bible? What did he mean? What was he trying to say to us? And I feel like through this, I'm kind of seeing certain things in a different way. And it's a really good book if only you read chapters 1, 2, and 3, because it just helps you to look at the Bible. There's 2 essentials when it comes to character. One, there must be a commitment to do what is right in spite of what it may cost. And those have been some of the decisions that I have been grappling with this week. Can I do what is right even when there's a cost? And sometimes there's a cost, and sometimes it's great. But in the end, I had to say, I have to do what is right and what the Word of God has said to me. Regardless of how hard, and this week has been hard. Decisions I'm making are impacting other things. And it is very hard. And yet we do what is right as defined by God because it is what God has called us to do. We must acknowledge that there is an absolute standard of what is right and wrong. Follow your heart is one of the dumbest things I ever heard. And find your own truth is also the dumbest thing I ever heard. Just find your own truth. It can be whatever you want it to be. That is true if you do not follow Christ. But if we follow Christ, truth is what we find in here. And that is being tested every minute right now. But we must be willing to live right and wrong. And what is right and wrong today will be what is right and wrong tomorrow and what will be right and wrong next year. The world will redefine it every single day of our lives. The standard is independent of our emotions, experiences, and desires. There's a lot of stuff I want that the Bible says I shouldn't. Right? We have desires that don't add up with this. So how do we have character? I'm just going to give us 3 things real quick because I'll dig into these in the next weeks. Dr. Day will be here next week. On Father's Day, I'll be preaching on Old Testament Joseph, on character and conviction. Here's 3 ways we can start to begin to develop character in our lives. Lordship. Here's one that Kathy Raby just feels the need to remind me of all the time. Do you have a mother like that? If you do, you are blessed, actually. But my mom will say, now, Colleen. This is her famous word. You've probably heard her say this now, Joy. I would think. I think we might put that on her gravestone someday. I would think. And this is her, I'm going to get you to do what I tell you. I would think that you would want Jesus to be Lord of your life. I mean, I would think. No one ever tell her when this goes online. I would totally say it if she was sitting right here. But I would think. Sometimes I'm on the phone with her looking at the door going, I know. But who is Lord? Isn't this the ultimate question that we must settle? When we are developing our character, we're deciding what is right and wrong, deciding how we will act, we must do it in the framework of who is the Lord of our life. And for many of us, it is not Jesus. Secondly, we begin to have character when we have intimacy with God. There is a correlation between personal character and our ability to know God intimately. And then lastly, I'll get into these more in the coming weeks. We begin to develop character, and I think this answers one of the questions from last week. Last week we talked about unanswered prayer, and what do we do with that, and why does it happen? Well, we develop character. Our character is developed through storms, delivered through storms. Sometimes character building comes through challenges and difficulties and storms. I'm going to close with this. In the last many months, there have been some difficult things that we've gone through personally and in the church, and just some things. And it was described to me like this. I feel like we're in the dirt. And I keep trying to reach my hand up, and Satan keeps stomping me back into the dirt. And that is how there have been moments like that, where I felt like that, where I thought back to the person that gave me that visual, and I was like, that's how I feel right now. I was on the phone with a friend of mine, a pastor on the West Coast, and she said, when I hear you talk about your church, I have this vision of plants poking out of the ground. And God is going to blossom something really beautiful. I said, I hope that's a prophetic word. And then 2 weeks ago, Alexa came home with a song that she wanted me to hear by Hillsong. It's not called Fire. It's called New Wine. It says this: in the crushing, in the pressing, you are making new wine. In the soil, I now surrender. You are breaking new ground.